thin crowd here.
I guess.
Yeah.
Wyandotte
You
wasn't
wanna
too bad.
lean into that?
The person I got.
Henry's got the right idea with the shades back there.
We can't,
It's really bright in here.
1923.
This one's
I know.
right here. Well, let's get started. Pledge allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Morning, everyone. Welcome to the Shawnee County Board of County Commissioners work session. It's Monday, March 20th, 2023, and today we're going to have Kurt Niehaus talk about some projects that has going on. Speak to our capacity crowd here today. So, Kurt, you're on.
Well, good morning, Commissioners. Kurt
Morning.
Niehaus, Director of Public Works. I have a PowerPoint presentation here that predominantly covers, well, not predominantly, 100% covers the bridge at Northwest 70th and Valencia Road. But once the presentation's done, you can ask me anything about any project or bridge we got going in Shawnee County. In fact, you could ask me anything work-related. We'll see if I can. You could play Stump the Chump and see if I can answer. Thank you for having me here on such a nice weather day. I'm going to go over a few things in the course of this presentation. We're going to talk about the bridge, not just the bridge itself, but that bridge type, how they work. I'm not going to get too technical on you, but I want you to understand where we're at with this bridge, and I think it's important that you have a basic understanding of how these structures work. Then we're going to talk about the bridge's condition. We're going to talk about some brief history here and a synergy between the bridge and a nearby railroad crossing. I'm going to talk about some closer considerations because that's always important to the community. I'm going to talk about, real briefly, about going forward, and then if you have questions, you can answer them, or you can ask them anytime during the course of the presentation. So let's get started. Probably the two most well-known marsh arch type bridges in the United States, at least here in the Midwest. One is located in Wichita. It's called the John Mack Bridge, and it's the second longest marsh arch in the country. It was preserved probably about 20 years ago. And then we have the bridge, Brush Creek Bridge in Cherokee County. That bridge is significant because it is located in the on the old US 66. Both of these bridges are relatively well known. The bridge in the lower right-hand corner is called the Rainbow Arch. I don't know why it's called that. I mean, obviously it's an arch bridge, but I don't know where the rainbow came from. But again, these two bridges are probably examples of the most well-known marsh arch in the Midwest. If you want to know, the Marsh Arch was the brainchild of James Barney Marsh, a bridge designer from Iowa who patented the concrete and steel truss design in 1912. Supposedly, he erected approximately 70 of these bridges throughout the Midwest. I don't know how many remain. But there are 3 in Shawnee County. The bridge in question this morning is in the northwest part of the county. It has, and then we have a bridge that's on the historical registry. It's on 10th Street out west of Wanamaker, and that's in the middle of the map. And then we have a bridge in southern Shawnee County just west of US 75. Based on the load ratings, which I know of, which if you look, it's hard to see, but the bridge in the upper northwest part of the county, our bridge here in question, has a load rating of 7 tons. And that does not matter what type of vehicle it is. It's just 7 tons across the board. And if you can compare that to the other 2 bridges, it is by far the lowest rated bridge of the 3. This is a March Arch. This is the March Arch in question at 70th and Valencia Road. Ironically, it's about the same size as the bridge on Brush Creek in extreme southeast Kansas on the old US 66. Again, it's located on Northwest 70th over Big Soldier Creek. And if you notice there is a railroad crossing just to the southwest. And I'll get into more of that geometric relationship between the crossing and the bridge here in a little bit. Basic structure information. Again, it's a Marsh Arch. It has not been load rated by the state yet because they're very difficult to load rate. It was built in 1927, which puts it at 95 years of age. Its main arch span is 110 feet. The overall length is a bit over 135 feet. Roadway width is 18 foot, and the reason there's an asterisk there is because it is a narrow bridge. It has a sufficiency rating of less than 20, which is the lowest in Shawnee County. It's structurally efficient. We've noted from the county maps that it has a daily traffic count of 75, but I had our staff perform an updated traffic count recently, and we recorded 50 vehicles on average per day. And again, as I said earlier, the posting is 7 tons, and that is for all truck types, including emergency vehicles. And that's important to note. Here are the approaches to the bridge. The only reason I really showed these is twofold. They are posted as a 1-lane bridge. It is narrow. And you can see the bridge posting sign in the background at 7 tons. And you will notice that as you approach the bridge, you're blind to traffic approaching from the opposite side. This is how these bridges work, just in real brief and very general. Traffic crosses the bridge. The load is transferred between the 2 arches to those transverse floor beams. Let's see if I can pinpoint their location for you. They're every so often, they're transverse. They connect the 2 sides of the road, the trusses on both sides of the road. They connect those 2. So the load is transferred to the floor beam. The floor beam seems like that old skeletal thing, the bone, you know. The floor beam's connected to the riser, and the riser is the vertical members that connect to the upper truss. And this is the risers. And then the truss is the key member in the whole system. It's what transfers the live load and the dead load of the structure to the abutments.
So is there a steel structure within all those concrete components of that?
Yeah, I'll
bridge?
get into that a little bit.
Okay.
So, again, this isn't structural bridge analysis 101. I want you to see how important, I want you to understand how important this upper arch is. It is the key member to the function of the bridge. The bridge is a system, but again, the arch in my mind is the most important component. Now, as you see, the load follows the arch. It's in pure compression, or it's supposed to be, to the abutments, and then, if you can see it, there's a blue line just below the bridge deck. That is a tie that keeps the abutments from spreading apart. Because if the abutments spread apart, then you've lost your foundation. The arch wants to flatten, and then you're in the creek. So again, the arch is the key. Bill, as you said, this is basically a steel truss encased in concrete. The steel provides the tensile strength. The concrete provides corrosion protection. Really, it provides the beauty of the structure. Can you imagine what this lattice work would look like if it was out in the open? and it provides resistance to buckling. The steel itself doesn't provide enough, moment of inertia to prevent the buckling of the upper arch. So it provides the rigidity that's needed for compression. The steel provides the tension load needed. Bridge's condition. This is the south arch at the east end. We have these large longitudinal cracks opening up in the arch. The crack here is 9 feet long, and it's a 1 3/4 inch opening. That was back in January of last year. It has since increased in width, the opening, by 1/4 inch in the 12 months ending January 2023, and it's opened up another 1/8 inch in the last 2 months. That's our big concern. Again, this arch is supposed to be in pure compression, but what we're seeing there, it almost gives me the impression that there's some bending going on. Something is happening in the structure that it wasn't designed for. At the west end of the south arch, we have the same thing. It's not quite as bad. We have a 9 by 1 foot crack. The crack increased in the 12 months ending this January. It increased by a 1/2 inch, and then in the last 2 months since January, it's increased another 1/8 of an inch. And we know this because if you can see here in the picture, there's a gauge right there. And we're monitoring that crack. And that gauge tells us how much the crack is opening, and it tells us if there's any side-by-side movement across the opening. The history. The talk about the history I want to make clear to you is I know you're wondering, well, Mr. Niehaus, you're the Public Works Director and the county engineer. How could you allow a bridge to get into this condition without it being replaced? And I will explain the reason that we haven't taken any action with this bridge before. But what I want to say here is I want you to see the relationship between the railroad crossing and the bridge. You take the railroad crossing out and the bridge is extraneous. You take the bridge out and the railroad crossing extraneous. It's no longer needed. It doesn't serve any purpose. There's nothing between the bridge that's of value that you have to visit, you have to get to. So without one or the remaining piece has no value. So please keep that in mind. So then back in 2004, the commission approved a resolution covering the temporary closure and initiation of proceedings to vacate a portion of the railroad crossing at 70th and Valencia Road. That's the crossing you see here in the southwest of the bridge. Okay, now let's look at some history here. Back in 2004, when the the commission took this action, 62nd Street didn't run all the way through. 62nd Street stopped at Docking Road, and so if you wanted to get to Hope Road, you had to go north on Docking Road 1 mile, and then you had to go east on 70th 2 miles. You had to cross the railroad tracks, you had to cross the bridge in question, and then you could come back south to Northwest 66th and continue east, or you could come back south to Northwest 46th and continue east, whichever you prefer. Sometime between 2005 and 2010, the connection on Northwest 62nd Street was completed. That was a KDOT project. There was county dollars in the project, of course. It was probably an 80-20 split. And with the completion of that 2-mile segment of Northwest 62nd Street, I hope you can see that the road 70th Street became less important. Remember, before that connection was made in red, you had to go north, then go east, and then come back south. With the connection on 62nd Street completed, you didn't have to go north and then go east. You could continue east. So it made 70th Street somewhat moot, extraneous. And if the road was no longer as important, the bridge is no longer important. So the intent all along was when the project on 62nd Street was completed, the bridge would not be replaced. So there's never been a plan to replace the bridge. April 15th of '24, Commission executes an agreement with KDOT providing $75,000 towards the construction of Northwest 62nd Street. That was our connection, 2-mile connection on 62nd, in exchange for permanent closure of a railroad crossing at 70th and Valencia Road. So the state was going to provide Shawnee County an additional $75,000 beyond the normal 80-20 split to remove the crossing at 70th and Valencia Road. Then in January 10th of 2005, there was an agreement with the UP Railroad. They were going to provide $25,000 for approach removal work and the permanent closure of the crossing at 70th and Valencia Road. Again, this was all made possible because of our project on Northwest 62nd Street. On January 11th, 2005, Public Works writes a memo to the County Councilor's Office requesting vacation of the crossing. And Jim, I believe that letter was written to you, or that email was written to you.
Oh, I remember this.
Yes, okay. Then in February of 2005, BCC executes an agreement with KDOT in which the contribution, the $75,000 contribution, was turned into a credit. So we never really received any money. The intent was when the project was complete on 62nd Street, the final accounting was done, KDOT would give us an additional $75,000 credit. Then in May 2005, there was a public hearing on the road vacation. Again, when I say road vacation, it really wasn't a road vacation, it was a crossing vacation. And in June 14th of 2005, the road viewing takes place. And this is what we saw at the road viewing. There was a parade of vehicles that crossed the bridge. It was quite an ordeal. Ironically, some of these same vehicles are probably the reason the bridge is in the shape it is today. We're talking school buses, fire equipment, emergency vehicles that were probably overweight for the bridge in the condition at the time. On June 16th of that year, the commission acknowledges the road report, which was a 3-0 vote against vacation of the crossing. Public Works then in late June notifies KDOT of the possibility that the railroad crossing at 70th and Valencia will not be closed. And then in 2009, I've looked at the statement for the project costs on Northwest 62nd Street. The project was being finalized out. There was no $75,000 credit. I only bring this up because neither KDOT nor UP paid us any money. We have no financial obligation at this point in time to close the crossing. Again, it was just some history there that I thought was important because it related to the history of this bridge. Again, because the idea was the crossing comes out, the bridge is no longer needed. The bridge was no longer needed in our minds because we had completed the connection across Northwest 62nd Street. Okay, let's talk about some closure considerations. School district. I applaud the school district. They have not been using that bridge for quite some time. Now, I have to be honest with you. If there was a bridge there that they could use, they would use it. But they have not been using the bridge, and they have adapted. Let's talk some railroad crossings. I've talked to a few people that live up in the area, and they've talked about the railroad crossings. Their concern is if the railroad crossing at 70th in Valencia is removed, it gives them one less crossing available to them to cross the railroad tracks. You might say, well, what's the big deal? Well, as I'll get into here in a little bit, this line carries a lot of railroad traffic. And so what they do is they have a sense for when any one of these crossings, the blue is a double track, the green is a double track, the blue is a single track. The reason I separated between double and single tracks is because if you have two tracks, obviously the odds that the crossing is going to be blocked is greater. Then the red are important because those are bridges over the railroad tracks. So obviously if you take out one of the crossings, it reduces the options available to the public to get south and west of the tracks or north and east, whichever it may be. Okay, this is a traffic density map. It's from 2007. It was the latest one I could find. It comes from a KDOT rail report. If you see the purple, the heavy purple lines, those are the heaviest railroad tracks routes in Kansas. Probably the heaviest traditionally and at the present time is the segment between Kansas City and Topeka on the Union Pacific. But if you see there at Topeka, it splits into three fingers. The finger to the northwest towards Marysville, the purple one, still carries a tremendous amount of traffic. Again, the purple is the highest density. So I wanted you to see that. But then in another rail report, it shows the intensity or the number of block crossings that we see throughout Kansas. The darker the color, the more crossings that are blocked. And if you look in the area just northwest of Topeka, there's some shading, but it's not real dark. So on one hand, we have a route that carries quite a bit of traffic. On the other hand, at least according to a KDOT rail report, there doesn't seem to be a tremendous number of blockages. Which I want you to know that when I was a kid, a train typically had engines on the front. When I was in college, I saw trains that had engines in the front and the back. Because the trains were getting so long, they needed to put engines at both ends to keep from tearing the train apart. Now trains are getting so long, 10,000 feet maybe, that they have engines in the front, the back, and at the center. So the longer the train, the more crossings that are blocked. And people have told me there are times when two adjacent crossings are blocked. But again, they kind of have a sixth sense about this in the area. They know that they have a feeling about which crossings are going to be blocked, so they travel appropriately to where they think they can make a safe crossing. All of these crossings that I noted in the previous map are gated, except of course the red squares those are bridges. So that's a consideration. I'm trying to be fair and open-minded here. That is a consideration. Let's talk about Fire District number 1, Silver Lake Fire District. Basically, the fire district covers Grove Township, Menoken Township, Silver Lake Township, The city of Silver Lake. 5.7% of their calls are to Grove Township. As you can see in the map there, the kind of the blue area, the rectangle is Grove Township. There's an inverted triangle, which is the location of our bridge. Now, if you live in this 5.7% area, response is important to you, I understand. So I don't want you to think I'm belittling that. I just want you to see that in the overall scheme of things, that 5.7% of the fire district's emergency responses are to Grove Township. So what I did is I did a simple analysis. I looked at different points along the southwest quadrant of the township where I thought, well, you don't have the full picture here. Let me go back one spot. In that map, it's important to note that the fire district has 2 manned stations, one in Silver Lake, right down here, one just west of Minokan on Landon Road at US 24, right there. They have an unmanned station just east of our bridge in question, right here, and they have a future station they hope to build right here at 62nd and Landon Road. Okay? So, because of the location of the station, the unmanned station just east of the railroad tracks and just east of the bridge, I thought the area just to the south and west of the railroad tracks and the bridge would be a critical area for any delays that might occur if the bridge no longer exists. So if, for example, on point A, let's say there was an emergency at point A. If the bridge was in place, they would take the red route. And it is 4.65 miles. If the bridge is not in place, they have to take a loop. So they could either go west and then go north on Valencia Road, which is a gravel road. That's what's indicated by the dashed line. Or if they didn't want to take a gravel road, they could take an all-weather road, a paved road, by going east to Hoke, north to 86th, and back to the west. If they did that, that route would be 5.6 miles. That would be an additional almost 1 mile trip. Now, one thing I want you to be aware of, this is a very simple look at this. What I'm not taking into account is differences in speed, travel speed. I'm not taking into account the time it takes for personnel to get to this unmanned station. I'm strictly saying, once you have people and equipment available to move, the travel distances would increase. Again, if you took the all-weather route, the all-paved route, by almost a mile. If you took the gravel road, you could actually reduce the distance of travel. I did the same thing for points further south, where you would take a southern route. Again, the red is the route you would take if the bridge was in place. The blue is the route you would take if the bridge was no longer in place. And you can see that the red route is 1.65 miles, the blue route is 4.46 miles, so that's an increase of almost 3 miles. Okay? Trying to be transparent here, looking at the pluses and minuses. Now, as you go south, away from the tracks, it becomes less important because the station at Silver Lake is probably going to be the primary responder. But nevertheless, I looked at all the points in the dark red area, and I hope you can see that basically the maximum change or the maximum increase in travel distance was 3 miles. As you go further south, the increased distance traveled is lessened, and if you continue further south, it becomes almost a moot issue because, again, the station at Silver Lake would probably be the primary responder. Okay, so I've talked about the school district, the fire district, the railroad crossings. You know, if people think this crossing is so important to the function of the community, I say there's a better way to spend county money. You know, we have on 46th Street, we have a bridge crossing of the railroad tracks, 46 at Big Soldier Creek. In my opinion, rather than put money into a bridge at the present location at approximately 70th and Valencia, I think a better use of county funds would be to build a bridge over the railroad tracks on Hope Road south of 66th Street. And that would be right there. Now, I'm going to be honest with you, this crossing would be expensive. The bridge, if we replace the bridge at 70th and Valencia, we're talking about approximately $1.5 million. If we build this bridge on Hoke Road, I think it would be even more, but I think from a community standpoint, it would be more valuable because then you have your east-west route over the railroad tracks, and you now have a primary north-south route over the railroad tracks. Now, one thing about railroad crossings that you have to keep in mind, when you cross a highway, you need about 16 to 16 and a half foot of clearance, vertical, to cross a highway. And this is between the roadway surface and the bottom of your bridge superstructure. For a railroad crossing, you need approximately 23 to 23 and a half feet. So the real expense comes from you would need a tremendous amount of fill in the approaches to get up and over the railroad tracks and then back down by the time you get to Northwest 66th Street, which is right there. And then you have a river crossing right here, which we couldn't start going up over the tracks until north of the river crossing. So I don't know if it's feasible, but my opinion as your public works director is that that would be a better use of county funds than replacing the bridge at 70th and Valencia. Okay, let's talk about what I plan to do going forward.
Kurt, could I ask?
Yes.
A question? You mentioned the schools aren't using the bridge now.
Mm-hmm.
Do the fire departments use the bridge?
Let me put it this way. They've promised me since I've met with them, they will no longer use the bridge.
Okay. All right.
And let's not forget trash collection. I've talked to Bill, and he promises me they will no longer use the bridge.
However, this is a bridge in a pretty remote area.
Mm-hmm.
No one's monitoring it. You could have farm equipment that's going over the bridge.
Absolutely.
You could have buses, sanitation, fire, emergency. We would never know.
You're absolutely right. That is the key, is that you can post a bridge all you want. It's not like we have the sheriff's department sitting there making sure no one crosses that bridge if the vehicles are overloaded. You're absolutely correct. What it does, as far as I understand, as far posting a bridge, what it does is it protects Shawnee County.
But you could have farm equipment, and combines that are going over it to farm. And again, how would we know?
How would we know?
Now, the buckling, I see you've got number one on your next thing to talk about is monitoring the cracks.
Mm-hmm.
You had indicated that you had suspected that there was some buckling going on in the Marsh Arch.
Mm-hmm.
And is that buckling because of the age of the bridge, because water has gotten into the concrete and expand and contract with the seasons and ice and it's just age and weather, or is it because of the traffic over the bridge?
Well, to be honest with you, I cannot definitively answer your question, but I can, in a general sense, give you my opinion. Our third-party consultant who does our bridge inspections, they've looked in the crack, and the exposed structural steel, the truss members that you can see when you look into the crack, are not heavily rusted. So the cracks, I don't believe, are caused primarily by freeze thaw. I think they're structural in nature. And the fact that we had been performing a bridge inspections every 2 years, and then all of a sudden this January, we saw a substantial change occurring, to me, points toward a structural issue.
Okay. Now, you indicated that it's difficult to give an accurate load, weight recommendation on a marsh arch bridge such as this. Is 7 tons set at a low amount just to protect the county, or is 7 tons an accurate amount?
It's an engineering estimate.
Okay.
Now, here's a thing that I will talk about in a little bit. Our third-party consultant has suggested to me that if we leave this bridge open, we post the bridge for 3 tons. I responded and said that is not practical because of the issues you've just brought up. Number one, we can't monitor that bridge 24/7. 3 tons, heck, there's F-350, 3/4, 1 ton pickups fully loaded pulling a trailer that probably weigh more than 3 tons. It would be impractical, in my mind, to post a bridge for 3 tons.
Now, the public can become very attached to bridges, and the Shawnee County Commission was subject to quite a bit of ridicule and negative comments when we replaced the WPA bridges on Southwest 29th Street, leading between California and Croco, as well as on 45th Street between California and Croco. But those were due in part to the rock structure, the decay, the barrels needing to increase the flow of traffic, the width of the road. There was a whole litany of factors that we went through, not just replacing the bridge just for the sake of replacing the bridge, and trying to maintain the history of the bridge as much as we could. Likewise, when we replaced the Willard Bridge, there was a number of people that were attached to the open graded, characteristic of the community, even though the open graded was not the safest in the weather because you couldn't clear ice and debris from it. But there were people that became very connected to it as a community. Is there the possibility of maintaining the bridge as a historical bridge as a part of the community, being a marsh arch bridge, or does it serve, I mean, we're talking, your traffic count right now is between 50 and 75 daily. Is it a culturally significant, community significant bridge? You said there's only 70 marsh arch bridges that were constructed, and how many are left?
Well, I would say, is it historically significant for the community? I'd say, again, this is my opinion, I would say no. It's in a rural location. It's not located adjacent. It's not a mile out of Silver Lake. Now, you could argue that you could keep traffic off of it and leave the bridge in place. But I think there's some hazards to Shawnee County if we did that. This bridge has a tendency to attract young kids who like to climb on top of the arch and get their picture taken. This location is just upstream from a railroad crossing. If it falls in the river during a major flood event, it could put those bridges at risk. My personal opinion, considering the condition of the bridge and the fact that Shawnee County has 2 other bridges of the same design, if it's closed, it should be removed. But I'm looking at it from an engineering standpoint. I'm looking at it from the standpoint of public risk. That is my opinion.
Kurt, you said we've got two other marsh arch bridges. What's the condition of those?
They're in much better shape. Back when I showed you the map with the 3 bridges, it was hard to see, but there was the load rating for those bridges. Those all load rate quite a bit higher, or their postings are quite a bit higher than this bridge here. This bridge at 7 tons is by far our lowest rated bridge in the county. Sufficiency-wise, it's by far the lowest rated.
Was this one just not built as well, or just not maintained as well, or?
I don't know. I'd have to go back and look what the age of the other 2 bridges are. I suspect all of these bridges are within 10 years life. In fact, they were built, I'm guessing, within 10 years of each other. I don't know. This bridge has the longest span of the 3, so maybe that's the reason it hasn't held up as well. But I want to caution us to just let's caution against just focusing on those top arches. The bridge has other issues. If we go back and look, bear with me just a second. The bridge is located in a hairpin, almost like a hairpin. Notice the creek is taking a really sharp bend at the location of the bridge. We've had issues in the past with the abutments being eroded. The riverbank is eroding away from the abutments. So it's not just the arch itself. It has other issues. It's narrow. It can't be widened. These bridges can't be widened. I suppose you could break off the spalled material and repair the arches. But what do you have? It's all superficial. It doesn't improve the structural capacity of the bridge. In order to really do anything significant to improve the condition of the bridge, it would be extremely, extremely expensive. And what do you have? You have a late 50 DeSoto. Or, I mean, I think we're past the point of no return. This bridge is structurally at the end of its service life.
3 years ago, when we were looking at the replacement of a bridge in the eastern part of Shawnee County, there was consideration to whether we would replace the bridge or make it a removal of the bridge and dead end the road on either side with a turnaround. And we ultimately came to the decision to replace the bridge. How do those factors that we went through on that process differ from the factors that we have for this?
Well, number one, it was located in a community, Tecumseh. So there was a connection to the community and the bridge. I mean, it was right outside the community of Tecumseh. There was a lot more traffic on the bridge. I had a concern. If you recall, if we would have removed the bridge and not replaced it, and then basically took the 2 ends of the road and put a cul-de-sac, I was concerned about illegal dumping and other nefarious activities that would go on at that location, because we had a wooded area and the cul-de-sacs would have been very secluded. Here, it's out in the open, it's in a rural area, there's no community. I mean, you could say the old community of Grove, which much of that doesn't exist anymore. This is just a different location. It has a different flavor. There's, to me, none of the same connections that we had with the Laurel Road Bridge.
And I guess where I'm kind of going is you're applying the same standards to Tecumseh that you did to Grove. We're applying the same standards, the same review. we're not arbitrary and capriciously treating one area differently than another area.
Absolutely not. I think like an engineer. I don't factor in the other issues. I consider in the back of my mind cultural things, the relationship to the community, but I have no axe to grind. I'm looking at this strictly from an engineering standpoint and for my concern for the county.
And I guess I'm just thinking like a lawyer, you're gonna treat one area the same as you would treat another area. So,
I mean, the conditions are different, every situation is different, but I'm applying the same thinking, the thought processes at the two locations.
Also, there wasn't a train crossing involved
No.
at that location either.
no,
I mean, if you talk to Union Pacific or BNSF, they'll tell you the less train crossings we have, the better. I mean, especially at one like this where the geometrics are not very good. I mean, the possibility of an implement high centering on those tracks or something like that and getting stuck and causing a train accident is pretty high at a rural crossing like that. A lot of times people don't even realize they're there. I mean, I think that's a different component of this as well. Have we talked to the railroads about this at all? I mean, since 2005
5.
or 6 or whatever that was?
No, I took no actions with the railroad until I was through this process. And I'll get into a little bit more on that in a little bit, but,
There's a chance if they find out we're talking about it, they might just tell us they're gonna close the crossing anyways, right? I mean,
well, I'm not sure legally
they
they can
can't
do that.
Okay,
Yeah.
Mr. Chair.
yeah.
This is Jim Kraut, Shawnee County Counselor. Yeah, they can't legally do that. And the reason why they were gonna contribute $25,000 at the time is because there's a federal regulation that requires them to contribute when we do a project that closes a crossing. So your point about they wanna close crossings is a good point. They do wanna close crossings, and there's federal, I'm assuming it hasn't changed, but there are federal regulations in place that require them to contribute to local projects that result in the closure of crossings.
Kurt, how many houses are there going north from this bridge? It's about
There's not very many. There's a few. You mean on Valencia
Yes.
there? Yeah, there's not very many. But that road would not be impacted. I mean, you can still use that road. You just, when you came to the intersection there, the T intersection, it would just mean you could no longer go west and you would have to go east, but as
I would
far.
imagine most of the people on that road would go east, and then, like if they were driving to Silver Lake, they would go east and then south, just to stay on a paved road.
Yeah, let me go back a little bit. Oh, that's a good road, good map. Yeah, Valencia Road south of the railroad tracks, right here, it's basically a gravel / dirt road.
Yeah.
It's not the greatest, whereas, of course, the road east of the bridge is paved. So I suspect you're right, Bill. Most people that get to that intersection would probably go east. Most of them are probably headed towards Topeka. So they go east to go south to 66th, and if the crossing isn't blocked, they would continue south to 46th Street. I mean, I'm speculating, but I'm just trying to envision the traffic, and I'm visualizing the traffic heads south toward US 24, or it heads south and east toward Topeka in a checkerboard fashion. People can still come east on this segment of Valencia Road. They'll still be able to come east and then go south. people on this section of Valencia Road would still come south and then could go east. The only thing we're blocking by removal of the bridge is the crossing of the 2 1-mile segments, the connection of the 2 1-mile segments. But again, reiterate, 70th Street is not as important as it used to be once the connection, the extension on 62nd Street was completed in probably, I'm guessing, 2008, 2009.
So, Kurt, let's just state the obvious for what it is. In 2005, you had a total contribution between the railroad and the state of $100,000. In today's terms, using the inflation calculator, that'd be $157,000.
Okay.
You had 3 commissioners who were really, by all intents and purposes from your presentation, looking at replacement or removal of that bridge. The community interest that was sparked by it and the community activism that was sparked by it changed the mind of 3 commissioners to not do it. So, fast forward the calendar to 2023, everything you've presented today logically says this bridge should be removed and we should go in an alternate route. Community activism re-sparks and the community says, save our bridge, and the county commission changes course. Is the bridge salvageable in its current state with the crack?
For how long?
What-
It's
Is
salvage.
it repairable?
No, I believe it is not repairable. You could repair almost anything, Kevin, if you throw money at it. I'm saying it would not be a good use of county funds to spend significant dollars on this bridge.
Okay, so I can't throw some concrete epoxy into that crack, seal it up, and call it good?
Nope. Nope. The problems are way worse than that.
Because if you even remove the weight restriction, you you enforce the weight load, people are not going over 7 tons, which, again, weight of vehicles has increased, the amount of traffic has increased, or the types of traffic has increased. In its current state, it would not be your recommendation to repair the bridge.
Correct.
So then you're really looking at either closure of the bridge and maintaining it as a historical artifact, or removal of the bridge and going an alternate or replacement of the bridge.
Right. And I'm recommending that we remove the bridge and not replace it. I do not see anything at this point in time that warrants replacement of the bridge. And this is consistent with the history. 62nd Street gives us an alternate route. I feel like if you want to spend money in the community where the money would do more good, let's talk about a railroad crossing, a bridge over the tracks on Hope Road, rather than talking about a replacement at 70th and Valencia, which, number one, is a poor location in my mind. It's a poor location from an engineering standpoint. It would be a $1.5 million expenditure at this day and time. Who knows what it would cost when we could get around to funding such a replacement. I think there's better alternatives than replacing that bridge.
Has this presentation been shared with the township or discussion with the township so that they're aware of this potential removal?
I have talked with the school district, I've talked with the township, and I've talked with the Silver Lake Fire Department.
Okay.
So, getting back, unless there's more questions, I would like to continue to monitor the cracks, perform a partial inspection every 2 months. We just had an inspection here last week. The results showed that the cracks were continuing to open up. I talked about a 1/8 inch increase in just the past 2 months. If necessary, I will condemn the bridge, which means closure, and it is allowed for me to do that as per KSA. Of course, I would keep the commission informed, and then at some point, I recommend the bridge be removed and not be replaced. Any more questions? Or questions of any other topic?
So, it looks like there's about 10 houses maybe that would be affected, in any significant way.
When you, 10 along which route? or-
I'm looking at Valencia and I'm looking at 70th. I mean, there's 2 houses west of 70th, or west of Valencia. I'm not so worried about the ones to the east because they probably are just gonna get access from Hoke Road. And then, I mean, south on Valencia, there's maybe 3 or 4 houses. They're pretty accessible from 62nd. And then there's a handful that are north of 70th. I don't think it'd be too tough to have a public meeting up there. I mean, there's a Grove Township Hall just right up the street. I mean, it seems like maybe what we ought to do is just have, anybody who's on that road, give them notification and have a public meeting and just explain this. I mean, we gotta lay it out for them. I think maybe what happened last time, and I wasn't here, I don't think either of you were here.
Jim was.
Jim, was there a public meeting last time? I mean, or did it come after all the plans were laid in place and they were shocked?
My recollection is not that people were shocked, that when we went to have the road view, because they had been given prior notice, there was a well-organized effort to appear at the road view and protest the proposed action to remove the bridge and to close that stretch. Obviously, in the interim, that was almost 20 years ago. In the interim, the Northwest 62nd Street project was completed. I don't know what effect that would have on people, but I can remember at the time, the same sort of, there really isn't that many people affected. There really are easier routes to get around, and that didn't seem to sway the public in the area. I think people were surprised by the number of people who showed up who say, I use the bridge, this will affect me, that sort of thing. Again, that was 20 years ago. We've had other projects since then. I don't know to what extent that would happen now. I think a public hearing process is probably the smart way to go, to let everyone know this is the condition of the bridge. 20 years later, the bridge is still there. It hasn't, the analysis as to why it needed to be removed is basically the same, and that it was, if we don't remove it, nature is eventually, and use is eventually going to get it to the point to where that bridge is going to have to be closed. That was always the future.
Let me be clear on just one point. Back 20 years ago, when this issue came up before, it wasn't about a bridge replacement. It was about a railroad crossing. But the public was savvy enough to know that if you remove the crossing, sooner or later, the bridge is going to come out because it's no longer needed. So I just want to make sure that connection, I think it's subtle, but it's important. Here we have a bridge. It's at the end of its service life.
This is Jim Crowell again. The paperwork may show the focus was on the crossing, but definitely the bridge and the condition of the bridge was one of the focal points of the discussion at the time. So it didn't take a huge leap for people to understand, because we were telling them at the time that the future of the bridge is that it is going to continue to degrade to the point that at some point it'll have to be closed. It'll go through a series of weight limits, decreasing, and then at some point, the county engineer, whoever that may be, will have to close it down as a matter of public safety.
And so again, I've talked to the township. Of course, I have no problem with a public meeting. I anticipated one. This is just another step in that process of ultimate closure. Go ahead, Bill, I'm sorry.
I just had a quick, if someone was to go over that bridge with something more than 7 tons and it was to fail, are we liable for that situation?
Jim can probably speak to that better than I, but from what I understand, the posting of the bridge protects Shawnee County. In other words, if that happened and the bridge was posted 7 tons and a vehicle that weighed more than 7 tons went over the bridge and there was a partial collapse or something, it would protect the county because obviously we knew about the condition of the bridge and the posting was commensurate with that condition. Jim, is there anything you want to add to that?
Not here and not in this forum, but
Okay.
there'll be a lot of issues involved with that, let alone potential loss of life and all that even factor in before we get to liability. But generally speaking, you are correct.
Hey, Commissioner Rippon, though, when we were discussing the Willard Bridge, a number of the concerns were that it wouldn't be the overweight equipment that would cause the failure. The overweight equipment would cause the stress, and then it would be some other user that would ultimately be the one that would suffer the significance. Kurt, most of our public works projects are funded through the sales tax. We have those laid out on a 15-year plan. If you were to do a railroad crossing, you said that this would be approximately $4 million. Obviously, costs continue to go up. Maybe someday they'll go down, but I doubt it. But where would you envision this being within your workload? Is it going to be something funded through the departmental budget, or is it going to be on a future project list? Where does this fall?
Well, let's look at, let's say if Shawnee County went, they approached it on their own. We have projects scheduled through 2026. Actually 2027, but 2026, it's more of a hard schedule. And in 2027, our last Carlson Road payment occurs to KDOT. So the idea that after 2027, we'll have another $850,000 to spend on county bridges. Knowing kind of the cash flow, I really don't think we would have the money to take on such a project until maybe 2029. It's just an estimate at this point. We've got a bridge scheduled for letting this spring with KDOT. We have a bridge scheduled for letting next year on South Topeka Boulevard. We have a bridge scheduled for a letting in 2025. In 2026, we want to do 2 smaller bridges on Valencia Road, just north of US 24. So really, 2027 is the first year that there would be a slot available for us to tackle a bridge such as this, but we wouldn't necessarily have the money available at that time.
So if I was a resident and I used this bridge, and I was one of the 50 people that use this bridge regularly, if you close the bridge in 2023, I may not have a replacement to go over the railroad tracks until 2030, 7 years from now.
And that was entirely possible and maybe even probable. Again, from the bridge itself, there's never been a plan in Public Works to replace that bridge. And even if we tackle the bridge at a different location, a crossing of the railroad tracks, it's going to take money.
Kurt, if we were to go over the top of the railroad, do railroads participate in those type of projects, or? we
Well,
on our own?
technically, I guess if on Hope Road, if we went over the railroad tracks, we would be removing another crossing, an at-grade crossing, that is.
Which reduces their risk, I would think, quite a bit. And also, it reduces that time that they have roads. I think by state statute, that they can't close a crossing, but it's so many minutes, and they have to move, and they usually don't. They usually,
Well, they're trying to pass that right now.
oh, good.
Yeah, because it's a big deal in Wichita right now.
And
But
this is Jim Crowder. There was a U.S. Supreme Court case recently out of Oklahoma that seemed to limit local and state authority in that area, so we'll just have to see.
Yeah. Well,
And yes, back to an earlier question, the main issue is removal of crossing. So my understanding, based upon working on this before, is that's what triggers the railroad to be required to make a contribution to a project, and that's when the project's going to remove a public crossing.
According to KDOT, the proper procedure for initiating this is I would get with the railroad first, come to an agreement with the railroad on a crossing removal, and then approach KDOT. They would match with a review. They would potentially match what the railroad contributed up to $100,000. So conceivably, if the railroad offered $100,000, KDOT would add another $100,000. That's the best case scenario, obviously.
Which doesn't do much to a $4 million budget.
No.
it might help cover the removal of the bridge. I mean, that would, the existing one.
Yeah. Yes,
So
sir.
Kurt, we're talking about the alternative being going over the railroad on Hoke Road. I mean, have we looked at any alternatives with maybe extending Valencia south and then crossing at a better place over the creek? I know the way that this little section of the creek is very snake-like, but just south of there, it's a little straighter. I don't know if that would just complicate things, but I mean, roads are easier to build than bridges, so, I mean.
Well, I guess there's always that chance that you could reroute 70th maybe down here and cross the creek in the tracks. But again, it's 70th. It's not a major route. I just think if we're going to spend that kind of money, why not spend it on a road that's in the county road system? One that carries a lot more traffic. That was only my point, is that I felt like there are better roads to cross, pardon me here, there are better roads to cross the railroad tracks than at the Valencia / 70th Street intersection. Now, Aaron, I give it to you. Yeah, that's going to be a tough crossing because, like I said, you've got a river crossing just to the south of it, Big Soldier Creek. You got to get up and over the bridge, and then you got to get back down by the time you get to the intersection of Northwest 66th. So yeah, it's a tough location, but, you know, where else do you have a paved road that's on the county system? It just makes logical sense to provide a crossing at that location.
Do we know if the trains, I mean, it seems like these are pretty far away from any grain elevators or anything. And I know trains can get up to 2.5 miles now, but I mean, are these crossings getting blocked?
I did get a call from a lady who said, and that's why I talked about the community seems to know, they have a kind of a sense when the crossings are blocked, and they do their checkerboard thing to find the zigzag thing to find a crossing that's not blocked. The gentleman that lives just to the east of the bridge at the intersection with Valencia Road, he's told me that there's been a couple times where both the crossing at Valencia and Hoke Road have both been blocked at the same time, but it's rare. But it has happened. So, you know, now I will tell you that I've been up in the area often, both when I worked at KDOT and then I work at the county. I have rarely been stopped by a train, but that's just me. That's anecdotal. I'm not denying the fact that, yeah, if you live in the community and you're traveling often to work, to school, to what have you, that chances are there's going to be times where the crossing is blocked.
Kurt, just out of curiosity, how does your department do the traffic counts? Do you just throw down a meter across the roadway and count how many people go across? I mean, is there somebody with a clipboard checking off, sitting there for 24 hours? How do you do a traffic count?
We put the cables across the road.
Okay.
Yeah.
And for how long do we have cables there?
We had, for this time, I asked that they do it for a week. So
Okay.
we had it for 7 days. We took a total count and essentially divided by 7, and that was the kind of the average.
And do the cables just monitor traffic going over? Do they monitor weight of traffic?
They do not monitor weight. They strictly monitor the number of axles that go over the cable.
Okay.
And so like if you had a 3-axle vehicle, it would kind of count it as almost 2 vehicles because it only counts axles. And sometimes the counting doesn't jive. It doesn't know whether the count is based on a 2-axle passenger car or a 3-axle trash truck. It just counts axles, and you know that probably from odds, most of the axles are, you have a 2-axle vehicle, passenger car.
Okay.
Have we done that study already? Is that
Yes,
complete?
we did that, yes. I wanted to verify the 75. I thought it might be up a little bit, but it was actually down. And I think, quite honestly, the reason it was down is because the school district isn't using the bridge, and maybe people have started to shy away from it.
Any other discussion on this project?
I'll just say, I mean, I think safety's got to be our number one concern. I mean, whether it's the safety of the bridge or also the safety of the emergency response times for the people that live up there. But I think that we need to let the people know up there for like how significant these weight restrictions are. I mean, even if we have a public meeting and they still want to keep that bridge, I think we need to let them know how serious it is that they don't drive, you know, their grain truck over the top of it. I mean, it's, I think, bad enough that we probably ought to make sure that that's emphasized to the neighbors up there.
And I think that's what we should do, but at the same time, I can tell you from experience, when we were talking about the Willard Bridge, we had farmers that were driving their combines across, and implements across the Willard Bridge because they farmed on either side. And when asked, you know this is significantly over the weight, they said, well, there's no real other way for me to get from spot A to spot B, except for going across the Willard Bridge. So,
I don't think we have that situation here. I believe that there are options for every landowner to get to his or her property. There are other crossings of the railroad tracks. They're private crossings that allow farmers to travel from one field to another. What I've shown here are only the public crossings. And from my perspective, I don't want the bridge to become a liability to Shawnee County. So, if I continue to see these substantial changes in May, I may close the bridge. It may be something that I feel obligated to do. And I think that what you're telling me is that we would rather have that than an unsafe condition. And that would be consistent with how I believe or how I think and the profession that I represent.
just because we've dealt with this on the Willard Bridge, as the Public Works Director, by statute, he has the authority to close the bridge. The commissioners don't have the ability to override him. Our only response would be to terminate and replace.
And I hope you wouldn't come to that point.
So,
So what's our next step? What should we do at this point?
Well,
and technically, this is a work session, so we're not doing anything.
yep.
I just want to make sure
I
that's
just-
clear for the record.
No, I'm not wanting to vote on anything. I just think, do we
Well,
need to
as
have
you and I,
It's your district, right?
yeah,
It's my district.
as you and I have talked, Bill, maybe the next thing to do is to schedule a township meeting and take this show on the road, so to speak.
Yeah, that would probably be a good idea. Okay. All right. Any other questions, comments?
Any other bridges you're thinking about, Kurt?
As far as closures,
Closures, replacements,
no.
innovation,
No.
anything?
No. I wish we had more of them waiting to be reconstructed. I'll be honest with you, this sales tax program with the bridges has really done good things. We're getting down to the point where we're running out of structurally deficient bridges.
Yeah.
Now, one thing I want to caution you about is, as time goes on, there'll be bridges that may be added to the structurally deficient list, but as it sits right now at this time, we are running out of candidates, and then we will start probably working on narrow bridges and things like that. Or maybe a new bridge.
Kurt, the bridge that we recently replaced right off Auburn Road going west, do you recall what that project cost? And was that a comparable sized bridge?
Comparable size to the
And-
70th and,
Yes.
no, it would be, the bridge on Southwest 61st Street was substantially smaller
Okay.
than a bridge replacement at 70th
Okay.
and Valencia.
It's not a good comparison.
Yeah.
All right.
The creek is totally different. On Southwest 61st, we had a very relatively shallow creek, smaller. Up here, we have a very deep, Big Soldier Creek is very deep. It's incised, V-shaped channel. It's meandering, as we're trying to meander, as was noted. So it would be much more expensive.
I looked at the way that creek meanders around by that bridge. Is there any possibility after a large event where it would cut across that oxbow? And leaving
Oh.
the bridge an island, this kind of thing?
It's possible.
I didn't know.
I mean, ultimately, that's
Could happen.
what the rivers naturally do, is they ultimately then cut off and create a new path. That's how Silver Lake got their Oxbow Lake, of course. But it would typically be along,
Yeah.
very much in the future.
All right. Anything else?
Not on this.
On this,
Do we
other
wanna talk-
projects?
Well, do we want to get an update on the Auburn Road
The roundabout?
with the high school, or the middle school, I mean?
Um,
I mean, I know that nothing's like set in stone at this point, but, I mean, the conversations are happening, and
After the, obviously, I sent a letter to the school district, and they responded. Unfortunately, if we want to get this project done by August of 2025, we have to move forward on it. As we move forward on it, we can continue to talk about who pays for what. But from my standpoint, if we want to get this done by August of 2025, we have to continue to move forward. And so that's what I'm doing, and I'm hopeful as time moves on and we have a better handle on prices and the cost of construction, we can continue these conversations with the school district.
and it's a fast turnaround. I mean,
It's a fast turnaround.
typically, our planning process is 3 years, right? And this is
Yeah.
kind of 2.
Yeah. It's a shortened, design window. That is one of the reasons I wanted the school district to provide the necessary right-of-way, free of charge, to Shawnee County, because I knew it would speed up the process. And so I'm hopeful that the utility issues won't drag us down tremendously, and that we'll be able to get this project done.
And
Now, one thing is, one thing that's in our favor now is if with a roundabout at the major entry point to the school, that gives Shawnee County some flexibility, because again, 70 to 80% of the students will enter the complex from that roundabout, from east of the roundabout on 29th Street. If we can get that roundabout in, the school can utilize that, notify all the parents, all the people delivering students to the complex, that your only access point is this roundabout, and we can continue, if we have to, on our improvements to Auburn Road.
And these roundabouts will prevent stacking of vehicles.
They will prevent the problems that we see out on North Topeka Boulevard and Shawnee Heights Road. People attempting and unable to enter the complex using a left turn.
Yep.
Both left turns in and left turns out. This roundabout will solve that problem.
All right. Anything
And it provides added benefits to Shawnee County in that it tends to slow speeds down, and obviously roundabouts are safer connections. I keep saying that whenever I'm asked, because I believe it's true that they're much safer than a traditional four-way stop or a signalized intersection.
Any other questions or comments about any of our public works projects?
Not that I can think of.
Think of? All right. All right, well, thank you, Kurt. Next on our agenda is public comment. If we have anyone who'd like to speak on any subject. Seeing none. Administrative communications, do we have any? Nothing from the park department? Amanda, do you have anything?
No,
All right.
it was a great.
Then I believe we're adjourned, then. Thank you very much.